Hey all, it's Starzy and today we are going to be doing my July and August wrap up. August was a very busy month. Thus I was not online much in general, and thus we now have 2 months worth of stuff to talk about. So I don't want to waste any time, I don't want to be here all day. Let's just get right on into some things I've read recently. If you follow me on my Bookstagram, which is starlitreads, you will have already seen what I've read, but here are some more detailed thoughts. First of all, I finished off 2 graphic novels. I read Motocross Volume 1 and Volume 2. In these comics, you're following a girl who is a motorcycle racer, but there's also something like strange about her because she has to take this substance called crush to like stop from getting sick. And it's a substance that like others use to pump up their bikes, and there's this whole kind of illegal market for it. So you're kind of following her and her trying to kind of survive and stuff, I guess. I did enjoy these more than I was necessarily expecting to, actually. I think I gave them both 4 stars. The art's also really nice, and also she has an ex-girlfriend who is so beautiful. Unfortunately, I didn't get to do this wrap up before I handed everything back to the library, but I can't even remember her name, but she has like long pink hair and she's beautiful. She's beautiful. But these were fun and I am interested to read more. Okay, if you have any like comic book and graphic novel recommendations in general, let me know, because I love reading them. I grew up reading comics and yet I feel like I don't read them as much compared to everything else, which I mean, like, I know I don't, because I recently looked at my most read genres, which previously has always been fantasy, and it's just been overtaken, but we'll get into that. Try and take a guess now, I guess, at which genre has overtaken. Fantasy is my most read genre. Anyways, I read Extasia, by Legrand, the author of Sundial Girls, which was a YA horror I really enjoyed. So this was one of my most anticipated releases because it's another YA horror that I expected would have like sapphic elements, which it did. And it's like a witchy horror, lots of like buzzwords that should have been entirely my thing, but I didn't really like this. And I think it came down to a few things. One was like, it was set in this type of setting which was very religious in a way that was kind of expected, but at the same time it got to a point where it didn't feel like it was using that setting well in terms of like like, I don't know, the main character was very much just subscribed to everything that was going on in this town for like a long time, and wasn't really questioning the beliefs, and at a point it just felt almost gratuitous. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but I just was not having a good time. Mostly it came down to the fact I just did not enjoy reading this book, and even when we started to move away from that a bit and got into some of the other stuff going on, I really just didn't enjoy my reading experience with this, and I was really bummed out because it was something I was hoping that I would really enjoy, and I did not. But a lot of like traumatic stuff happening, particularly in the treatment of girls in this book, because the way this society is set up is that like 4 teenage girls are expected to take on the sins of everyone, which is in the extent of basically people verbally harassing them and like beating them and stuff. Sometimes it's, yeah, I just didn't enjoy it. I just didn't enjoy it. I then listened to Skulduggery Pleasant by Landy, which is a middle grade series where we have a young girl and she is helping out a skeleton detective, and they get into a bunch of stuff together. In this first one, I think it's her uncle had died and she was trying to work out, you know, what had happened, and things escalate from there, and I really enjoyed this. I gave this 5 stars. I enjoyed listening to this so much. I don't know, if you like stories that do have a younger audience but have like some of those darker themes but also like humor to them, Skulduggery Pleasant is a character who's quite amusing, and partially in the way he's like quite full of himself, and again he's like literally a skeleton walking around. I don't know, there was lots of stuff going on with this book, and I just had a really good time listening to it. That's all it came down to. I also read Sundial by Catriona Ward. This was a horror book, which again was one I didn't love. It was kind of like okay, but again I didn't love the reading experience. Also, I guess to an extent I kind of guessed what was going on as well, but you're following a mother who suspects there's something kind of wrong with her daughter, or like she's never really connected to her daughter, and like she's a bit concerned, and she like takes her away on this trip, and you don't really know what's happening, and then we kind of flash between what's happening in the present day with her and her daughter, and then also like flashbacks to her past and some strange things that happened when she was growing up, basically. This was fine. It wasn't like bad. I just didn't love it. And this is one that I've seen some people really love. And I remember, like, I read this, you know, this like I read this a long time ago now, because I read this in July, so I can't even remember distinctly what it was. I feel like there were a few elements particularly that made me not love it, but I don't remember what they were now. But I know other people liked it, so power to you, but wasn't my fave. The Plague of Giants by Hearne. This was a random fantasy I picked up from my library. This is like, you know, your epic fantasy. This is, you know, your high fantasy type situation, and you've got these societies that have been kind of invaded by these like giant people, but we don't. The way this book's told is kind of strange in that our like present day, we're following like one male character, and also his interactions with like a bard, and the bard is telling the stories of a whole bunch of different people, and that's kind of how we get glimpses into a lot of this story and what kind of most of this book is. And so the way it was formatted could get very confusing, and also because it was just the bard telling stories, they'd often be like, you'd be with one character for quite a short amount of time. It wasn't my favorite way to do the storytelling. I was quite interested at the beginning of this book, but then as it went on and we were continually jumping around and I wasn't being given enough time to actually connect with any of these individual stories, I felt like, so I didn't care, essentially. So by the end of this book I was like there was some interesting things going on with this book, but ultimately I didn't like how it was told, and I didn't care by the end because of the way it was jumping around and how it was told. That's kind of how I felt with this one. I then listened to Playing with Fire, which is the second Skulduggery Pleasant book. I didn't love this one as much as the first. I didn't quite have that same level of excitement, but there was one other thing in particular that dragged this down for me, and that's that there was, like, I know this was written quite times ago as well, it's not like a brand new book, but there was like a not like other girls moment where she was kind of criticizing her cousins for wanting to dress up and wear makeup, and I can't remember exactly what she said, but it was something like, oh, I can't even remember what it was, but she was criticizing the way that they were going to be picking out their lipstick or something, and just that one scene made me feel so awful about this book. It really soured the experience for me. I don't know, it was just a bit like, I get you don't get along with your cousins, but do you have to drag down other girls and the fact that they like embracing these feminine things just because you're off doing adventuring and whatever doesn't mean you should criticize them just for wanting to dress up with makeup. But anyway, I enjoyed it other than that. It's just I couldn't stop thinking about that one moment. I then read Beach Read by Emily Henry, and I gave this 5 stars, and this is where we come to my genre that is overtaking fantasy apparently this year, because currently where we're sitting at, where I think I've read like 69 books this year, and currently The genre with the highest percentage that I've read is in fact romance, which is very strange to me. But it is what it is. But yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I had previously just read, what was the one that came out? Book Lovers, and I really enjoyed that as well, so I went on and read, listened to this one. This one, I'm trying to remember because I pretty much read all three of her books back to back, so now I'm trying to like disconnect them in my mind of which one was which. This was the one where there were the two writers who were neighbours, and one wrote like kind of more gritty literature, something, I can't even think, literary fiction? Is that what I'm trying to say? He writes like literary fiction, whereas the woman writes like women's lit, and they're both kind of having writer's block, and they take on this challenge to each write in each other's genre, and I just really enjoyed this book. I don't think it made me cry like Book Lovers did, but I enjoyed this, and I enjoyed their interactions, and I don't really know what else to say about that because I've read too many things since for it to be clear in my mind. I will say, however, that the next Emily Henry I read I did not love as much as the other two, and that was You and Me on Vacation. I already knew going into this that I probably wasn't going to love it as much because this one is friends to lovers, like long-time friends to lovers, whereas the other ones are kind of like rivals to lovers, or just like mildly antagonistic to friends to lovers, whereas this is like a long-standing friendship to lovers, which I kind of is a genre that I think once upon a time I might have been able to appreciate more, but at this stage in my life and with past experiences, I can't, I don't know, they often make me uncomfortable to read. So it already had that going against it, and overall it wasn't like horrible to listen to, but there was that factor in it, and there was something else that bothered me too, and now I don't even remember what it was. I remember there was something else in particular where I was like, I don't remember. I couldn't tell you. I just know that, yeah, of the 3 Emily Henry books that I've listened to, this one is the only one I haven't rated 5 stars, and the one that I didn't love. So I then read Enthralled by Tiffany Roberts. This is the second book in a series, a romance series involving spidery alien people. I did read the first one during my monster romance vlog, if you have not seen that I did early this year. I went on and read the second one. Still interesting to read, although I didn't love this one as much. It did have things that bothered me, like there was like the jealousy element that came in, and I'm not a big fan of jealousy. And there was also now there was also a bit of a focus taken away from the main couple because we had other characters for reasons that were involved in this one. So there were some elements I didn't love about this, but I'm still enjoying it, and I'll still read the third one. If you're not scared off by a Spider-Man, that's a thing. I also listened to Emerald Blaze by Ilona Andrews. This is the 5th Hidden Legacy book. The first 3 Hidden Legacy books are like it's like my comfort series. I'm still enjoying this one because the first 3 follow certain characters, and now this part of the series, these 3 books follow other characters as like the main characters. But I'm still enjoying them. I don't love them quite as much. Don't have that same attachment as I did to like the first three, but I'm still enjoying them. Where following the sister of the main character from the first one, this series in general is like urban fantasy where people have like different magic powers, and there's a lot of like family politics and stuff interwoven, and I enjoyed the characters. Still enjoying this. I gave this 4 stars. And I listened to this because then in August the 6th one came out, which I'm currently listening to. I have not finished it, but I'm currently listening to that. Yeah. I'm a fan of the Hidden Legacy series. I like magic, urban fantasy stuff, and that's what this is. The covers are awful, and they would make you think that this is just a really romance-heavy series, but really, the fantasy is and plot is the focus point more so than the romance, even though there is romance that exists. The covers really give you the wrong impression about these series. Anyways, I also listened to The Ruin of Kings by Jenn Lyons. I was really enjoying this for most of it. I think a problem I had with this is that I did listen to it, and I'm not used to listening to really long audiobooks. Most of the audiobooks I listen to are YA or romance. So listening to an adult fantasy audiobook, it was a lot. So I started kind of tuning out closer to the end of this, and I think, I don't know that that's like a fault of the book. I think that's kind of the fact that I couldn't listen to the same voice any longer. Although I will say something that benefited the audiobook was that there were different narrators, and I think that's something that did help me to be less confused if I was reading it physically, because you've got multiple storylines going on and they're narrated by different people. So the bonus of the audiobook is that I was never confused about which storyline I was in, because there were completely different voices for each of them. So that was really good. That was a good thing about the audiobook. But yeah, it was just very long, and so I tuned out at the end, and I don't know whether that's because I was getting bored of the story or because I'd been listening to this story for so long. You know what I mean? But this is a fantasy story where we have a man like locked in prison, and he's told he's about to be like killed or something, and then you have like this monstrous woman that he's talking to, and they're each kind of telling his life story, and so you're kind of learning how he got to where he was, but they're telling his life story from like completely different moments in time, which I found a really interesting way to do it, especially because you had to make some assumptions about how things connected or were going to connect across the different timelines, and I did find that really interesting, and there was some really interesting stuff going on. So yeah, initially I was really enjoying this book. I think it just, yeah, I don't know if listening to really long audiobooks is ideal for me. That's what it comes down to. But as I said, the audiobook was great to begin with because I was never lost. Yeah, I don't know, so I'm at that point where I, like, as much as I enjoyed most of this book, I don't know whether I'm going to continue the series, just because, well, like, if I do, I need to take a break from it for a while after that. I don't know. There was also some interesting stuff in terms of, like, there was some open sexuality stuff, so that was cool as well. And also, you know, dragons and other stuff. A lot of people died. Also a lot of death in this book. Then read Painted All Red, All the Lies, and Scarlet, not in that order, hold on. What's the order of these? Scarlet Angel, All the Lies, and Painted All Red by S.T. Abbey. I read all of these in a row. These are books 3, 4, and 5 of the Mind F series, which is a romance series with a serial killer and like an FBI agent who is investigating the murders that she committed. So it's like it's, you know, a dark romance, some very dark themes. Definitely need to look at trigger warnings for this book, because especially when it comes to the reason she is killing people, and what happened to her when she was younger, it is a lot. It is a lot. Overall, I did find the series really interesting and engaging to read, though I did have problems with it. Particularly, I think it was the 4th book, the male character did something that I couldn't, like, he could not come back from for me, even though, like, the characters discussed it and it was resolved between them. For me, it was like, I cannot look at you the same, and to me now you are a terrible man, especially given these characters' pass. But yeah, other than one particular moment in one of the books that ruined one of the characters for me, like, it was interesting, and as I said, like, it wasn't like a wholesome romance that I like supported or anything, but at the same time it was like I couldn't look away. And yeah, I read the last 3 back to back. They're not very long, and they're on Kindle Unlimited, so they were easy reads. Again, though heavy content, but I found them interesting, and some of the character interactions, even outside of the romance, are interesting, and also horrible, horrible people, and horrible people get what's coming to them. If you want like a darker romance, like I guess I'd recommend them. Which leaves me with the last thing I read, which was a random book I picked up from my library shelves just cause I'd never heard of it before and I probably shouldn't have. What is this? Heiress on Fire by Kellie McCourt. Australian, so that was interesting. I don't get to read books that are set in Australia very often. This was set in Sydney, I think. A woman's husband has just died in a fire that she accidentally set, and now she's kind of being investigated for it, but she's trying to find out what like really happened, so there's that kind of mystery element to it. And she's like, you know, an heiress, she's rich, so she's like interspersed in that kind of culture. I just felt like this book wasn't really well done, and there were a lot of things that were kind of brought up as plot points, but then didn't really go anywhere and weren't really relevant to anything. There was like one section where in a brothel that was kind of interesting. That was probably the one particularly interesting part of this book. I kept reading this book just because I was too stubborn to give up. I was like, I've gotten this far, I need to finish the damn thing at this point. But yeah, it wasn't well done, and also there was the way that a number of things were discussed I didn't love. Like, yeah, so Australian heiress, that type of culture, and it's from her perspective. So she talks about some things in a way like you'd kind of expect, but at the same time, because we're in her head and because it's not questioned, didn't love it. Especially when it came to discussing some things like weight, and things like that. Like, even though she discusses that she herself isn't like skinny, but she kind of has this insecurity because her mom's really skinny, but she's not like, not slim. I think she says she's like a size 10 or 12 or something, like she's normal size, but I don't know. And then there was a scene with like Bigger Man and the way he was discussed and the way he was eating, and didn't love that. And what wasn't the only thing that bothered me. So the book overall I just didn't feel was well done, and then it also was having some conversations that I wasn't loving and made me uncomfortable. So yes, I think that's everything that I've read over the past 2 months. Hopefully I haven't forgotten anything. May not have given many details on a lot of these because I just wanted to get through them. But I hope you're all doing well. Please let me know what's your favourite thing that you have read recently. I guess mine was like, my only 5 stars out of those months were Skulduggery, Pleasant, and Beach Read, I think. So I guess they were my highlights. I think I read them both in July, but I guess they were my highlights. Let me know what you've been reading, what you've been up to. Let's catch up because it's been a while. Otherwise, I'll catch you next time. TTFN and Starzyarts. I just remembered that I made myself tea and I have not drunk any. It's been sitting here for like 40 minutes. It's not hot anymore.